Hi, good evening, good morning. Welcome to We are on the 95th episode. We are talking on the second part of the skillful party workplace relationship and conflict part 2. We had done this session about 2 weeks back, and we are continuing the same session again with Thomas, Rajiv, and Sunil. I think I'll bring Thomas and on board for the discussion. Over to you, Rajiv. Thomas, over to you. Sorry about it. Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Prem.
Thank you very much indeed. And it's good to have you all join us again today for this second part of our LinkedIn live session on workplace relationships and conflict. But really, what this is about somebody in the room, whichever room that is, wherever you are, being able to be the skillful party in the situation. 3 weeks ago, we talked about reviewing communication as a series of inputs and outputs. If you put this in, the likelihood is you'll get that out. And we toyed with the idea that perhaps the meaning of our communication, if we're to take responsibility, the meaning of our communication is in fact the results you get. So with that in mind, how can we input to try and get the outputs that we want? Last time we talked about the language of action. We talked about creating and sustaining rapport. We talked about outcome building. We talked about time structuring, action dialogue, and behavior shaping. And if you haven't listened to this podcast, I'd recommend you do so following this one. And today we're going to delve into the second part of the art of communication and how it plays a pivotal role in navigating workplace dynamics effectively. We'll explore even more strategies and techniques to enhance your communication skills as managers, executives, and directors. So let's get started. Here's today's menu. We're going to look at gaining commitment, negotiating styles, new communication, the NLP meta model, and NLP stands for Neuro Linguistic Programming, which means the way we talk to ourselves and other people will affect the results that we get. So that's an interesting area. We're going to look at Socratic questioning and how powerful and useful that is. We're going to touch briefly on mind mapping. And if we get time, we'll even cover the principles for creating short and effective meetings. So let's dive in straight away with number 8. This is the gaining commitment model. And I probably showed this technique to more managers, executives, and directors than any other. And it's about fostering buy-in and ownership among the people you're talking to anything you've got going on. And by involving them in this process, we can really engage. So maybe let's take you through the 7 steps of the gaining commitment model. So you might like to take a note of these. So this is the process for gaining commitment. It works face-to-face, it works on the phone, it works in writing. So it's a very, very powerful process for gaining commitment, but it also has to be done with integrity, as you'll see from the steps. So number 1 is explain the situation. Number 2 is explain the benefits for yourself, for the other person or people or group or whatever it is, and for the organization and for any other important people or organizations in the business. So once you've done that, you stop and you seek the individual's views. So what do you think? What are your views about this? So what you're doing here is immediately switching the tables and beginning to listen to the other person's point of view so you can understand where they're coming from. Step 4 is then, okay, listen, obviously, and respond openly. And it's a great process for learning more about the other person's point of view on the issue that you're trying to gain their commitment to action. Step five then is to ask for their help with whatever help you need to get the action done. So you ask for the help. You've usually thought about this in advance. And then step six, once you've asked for their help, and presumably they've said yes, because asking for help is one of the most powerful influencing behaviors we've got. When you genuinely ask for another person's help, they will mostly be predisposed to give you that help, especially if you found a way to find agreement in steps three and four. And then step six is agree further action and a follow up time when you're going to review how well that action has gone. And then finally, step seven is to thank the individual for the help they've offered and committed to, and express your confidence that the outcomes that they and you articulated in the first four steps will be achieved. And that's it. So steps one to seven. So that's the gaining commitment process. So let me stop there and see what questions we get from the other people here.
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you for the brief. And I think we are discussing one of the most important topics. Unfortunately, most of the leaders doesn't understand the importance of this, and very few identify that they lack in this skill set. But I will say this is very, very important because with my experience, I have seen in the corporate there are a lot of good leaders, intelligent leaders, having great knowledge, technical knowledge, commercial knowledge, but they lack in the in the communication. They doesn't understand that how to take the commitment from the people, how to take the teams along, and this is very very crucial component of the skill set of the management, for the leaders, for the business owners, because this is not affecting the individual, this is affecting the overall performance of the team as well as organization. So Thomas, with your experience, can you share the insight how managers should effectively communicate with the team members and communicate the expectation what they expect from the team members and gain the commitment from them? That is very very important, because until unless that commitment will come from within, then performance will not come. So can you please share that?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Sunil. That's a very, very good question. And it causes me to draw attention to the essence of this. If you attended the first session, you'll remember we had a look at the action dialogue.
Hmm.
And it had three first steps, which is establish rapport, clarify outcomes for you and the other person, and then dovetail outcomes. And that dovetail, in other words, join them together, is the key to gaining commitment. And it all happens in steps three and four, where you're seeking when you've stated your outcomes, uh, when you've explained the benefits, and you've sought their outcomes. And if they don't give them, then to ask about them. What are the things that you would like to achieve in this process? And what you're beginning to do is to create the possibility to dovetail the two sets of outcomes together. So they can see how by giving you what you want, by helping you create the benefits that you've articulated, they can get what they want. So by giving you what you want, they get some or most or even all of what they would like in the situation. And that's the key to motivating. And then the second key is this making yourself smaller than them in some respects by asking for their help. So you're not going to them as the omnipotent, infallible manager and saying, I know it all and I know everything about what to do. You're saying to them, I'm just like you, I'm a human being, and I would really value your help. So that's a really important positioning. So you empower the other person to help you. And that's a crucial skill.
Thomas, you've talked about making a commitment to people, but most of the times, what we've seen is people have a resistance engaging and seeking commitment, right? So, how do we look at some of the strategies for overwhelming resistance and foster engagement when seeking commitment. Thoughts?
So the key here is, and thank you for asking that, Prem. It's a very useful question to contemplate. Um, and the key here is about, it's back to the listening. To be interesting, then be interested. Ask the other person to help you understand their point of view, what they want in this situation, what problems they see in this situation, what opportunities could be there by an alternative point of view. And often, the person you're talking to will give you even better ideas about how to do the thing that you're trying to get done. So the situation that you're wanting to create or the outcomes that you're wanting to create, the benefits, can sometimes be even more improved by adding other people's thinking and ideas in the mix and dovetailing it all together. At a technical level, and we'll be talking about this shortly, when you're dealing with resistance, what you're trying to do is to get it explained. So, what's the nature of the resistance? And then suss out, so if that's the resistance, what outcomes would you like to be achieved? And then you'll see when we look at the NLP tools that one of the things that we can do is chunk it up in our thinking. And what I mean by that is going to a higher level. So you can say to somebody, if you were able to meet those outcomes, what would that get for you? And what that does is chunk them up in their thinking. And we'll talk about this a bit more shortly. And you keep going until such times as the highest level outcomes start to represent both points of view. So that's the strategy. And we'll talk more about this in a moment. But that is essentially how you overcome resistance. And it's a negotiating strategy as well. So chunking up to a higher level of the problem is also a negotiating strategy. And if you remember, Einstein, I think it was, that had the quote, which is, no problem can be solved. In fact, it wasn't Einstein, it was somebody else, but I think Einstein said it as well. No problem can be solved at the same level it was created. You have to go to the level above or the level above that to solve any problem. In other words, you have to go to the systems level of it before you can solve it. Let me stop there.
Thomas, can I request you to share some scenario where gaining commitment was very, very crucial in resolving the conflict within the team and achieving the common goal?
Sure, sure. A really good example was in the domain of healthcare. I was once working for a large healthcare provider, and there was always a kind of ongoing dissonance or disagreement between people who were managers and people who were doctors and consultants. And um, in order to get them both on board, I would have to go and gain their commitment so that they could be on a common strategy and thereby begin to modernize a healthcare facility, which basically needed to import lean and agile methodologies. Not that we call them that, we call them whatever they call them in describing how they would improve the healthcare facility. But really, what was going on is they were wanting the same kinds of improvements, the managers and the doctors and consultants were wanting the same kinds of improvements, but were using different language. And when we chunk them up to the highest level of this, which is improved care and improved wellness provision for patients, they all agreed because improved care satisfied the doctor's aim, which was to give the best care for patients, and it also met the manager's aim, which was to run a better business with less waste. So everybody's needs were met just by chunking up the goals. So let's begin to nudge this on now into negotiating styles. And this is another place where we can lose a lot of energy if we don't understand the different negotiating styles for navigating conflicts and reaching mutually beneficial, remember this dovetail word, mutually beneficial arrangements and agreements. And by adapting our approach based on the situation and the personalities involved, we can increase the likelihood of a successful outcome. So let me just take you through the essence, the the kind of the real core of negotiating. There's three kinds of negotiators we're likely to run across. There's what many people know as blue style negotiators, the color blue. And their philosophy is every negotiation should look for win-win. And the key phrase for engaging the other person in win-win is if you, then we. So, uh, so if you do this, then we will do that. If you want this, then we will give that. So it's a kind of, and it's always a give and take. So it's always a mutual win-win. So that's one style, the blue style. The second style that I'd like to draw attention to is red style. And it's red because mostly when you see red, it's danger. And this is people, old style negotiators they tend to be, who focus on winning and losing. In other words, we win, you lose. So their whole way of thinking is to win at the expense of the other party. And this can lead to terrible conflicts. And then the final style that we've got is what some people know as covert red or purple style. And this is the most tricky one because sometimes they're blue and sometimes they're red. And you really, as the negotiator, need to stay alert to which mode they're in at any moment. But if you stay safely in win-win, if you then we, then you should be okay. So always stay there. So in terms of preparation, I'm going to talk to you about a number of things. There's the balcony and going to the balcony. And what this is about, it's not really the balcony, it could be another room. But sometimes, rather than respond and react, you're better just taking a moment to think about it. There's styles, which we've just talked about, red and blue and purple. And if you enter the negotiation, if you go into the negotiation aiming high and knowing your BATNA, 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 which is best alternative to negotiated agreement, then you should come out with something worth having. So that after preparation, the next thing is to enter the debate. So part one is preparation. Number two is engage the debate with the other people or party. So first job, discover the wants. And second, as a principle, you need to say to yourself, people are not the problem. It's the problem you're trying to solve. And you need to know your outcomes rather than your positions. And usually outcomes are the kind of things you want out at the other end, the benefits that you'd like to have emerge from the negotiations rather than the things you don't want the other people to do, which are positions. A guideline is don't react. In other words, don't let them prompt you to react adversely without thought in an unresourceful way. Instead, go to the balcony. It might be to take a break, go to the other room, or literally go out to the balcony for fresh air. And sometimes I use the excuse of wanting a glass of water, so I can walk to the back of the room, have a few moments to think, and come back with a more considered view. And if I can, I will see their side of the situation, even to the point, if the negotiating room is set up face to face, I might go to even sit on their side of the table and ask them to show me what it is they have a problem with and to show me what their outcomes are. So I genuinely want to see their side. So we know if we suggest rather than propose, we'll do better. We know that mutual gain is the objective. We know that we will need objective criteria, and we don't reject, we reframe. And if possible, we build golden bridges to our, well, even things we didn't expect. And then finally, we do the bargaining around our background, having that in the background, but hopefully we reach high level outcomes. We bring people to their senses, not to their knees, and we document and agree the agreement, and we communicate whatever's agreed to all involved, and we check implementation. So there, in a nutshell, is a really comprehensive negotiating strategy. And I hope you've managed to capture some of that. If not, I would recommend you come and talk to us at Retensis, because all of this is part of the standard briefing that we give everybody. And of course, we give a lot more detail with this. Okay, let's take some questions, because that was quite a complicated little set.
Yeah, lot of pointers shared on negotiation skills, Thomas, and it is very important to have a negotiation skill, both professional and personal, set boundaries. But how can awareness of negotiation styles help prevent misunderstandings and conflicts in the workplace, Thomas?
Well, one of the things I love about that process is it's actually from two authors who
Mhm.
were party to international peace agreements years ago. And they used this process, they designed this process so that the negotiations could not go wrong. Uh, so, very, very important, very high responsibility role they had. And so they designed this process. And if you do the preparation, the negotiations go wrong either before they start, because people enter with the wrong ideas,
Mhm.
or they go wrong in the middle because they try and beat each other. In other words, win lose. So if somebody loses, and of course, if somebody loses, later on they're going to come back and try and win again. So if you
Yeah.
force somebody to lose face or to lose position, it's bad, it's dangerous, it's not done, the negotiation doesn't get completed. And then finally, it can go wrong if a great agreement is made and then it's not properly documented and written down. And a famous one at my end of the world is the Good Friday Agreement, which was brokered by the people in Ireland, the people in the US, and the people in the UK. And it's held and it's stood the test of time over more than 20 years now. And I'm sure you can all think of really great agreements. And there was another one between Portugal and the UK, which has stood since the 12th century, because it was well documented. And they got everybody involved. And periodically, they checked implementation and they communicated the agreement to all involved. So there's the keys. So it can go wrong before, during, or after. So if you can prevent all of those three,
Hmm.
that's how you do it.
Okay. Thanks for that, Thomas. Sunil,
Thomas,
hello.
negotiation is very close to my heart because in most of my career I have done that, being a sales career, being a business development career, and I believe a sales guy as well as international relationship management, that is all about negotiation. And we all know there are two important components, two important types of negotiation, that is competitive negotiation and collaborative negotiation. And it should be used according to the time, according to the environment, according to the situation. For the benefit of the participants, can I request you to elaborate little in detail the difference between these two styles, and when this should be used, when this should be used appropriately?
Sure, sure. Um, and of course, what we're talking about here is blue style versus red style. So collaborative is blue, win-win, and red style is competitive, which is win-lose. So in my experience, and I've been a professional negotiator now for nearly 40 years, I've never seen a situation when the collaborative negotiation style, the blue style, isn't the best. Sometimes the other player, it's very rare, probably about 2% of the times, the other side will not change from competitive. They just will not. And the best you've got to deal with that is best alternative to negotiated agreement, which is probably ultimately headed towards a lose-lose. But it's better than setting up a win-lose for one side or the other. Because usually a competitive negotiator will have a weakness. And if you can expose that, you can probably beat them. But they're going to be angry at you if you make them lose face and lose ground. So I've never seen a situation where that's been worth doing. And even in competition between companies where they're trying to grab market share, an option is always whether they collaborate in some way. And creativity, and sometimes out of that collaboration, sometimes in a negotiation, by working skillfully, you become aware of a higher level outcome that's better for both. And we call that the golden bridge. And it's as though just sometime during the negotiation, if you're all trying to get there with integrity, a better vision of the future comes to your minds. And it's possible that it trumps all the competitive outcomes that were sought. It's better for everybody in every way. So I would urge you to stay with the process and go for the collaborative win-win styles. It's much better for the world. It's much better for your organizations. And it's much better for ongoing relationships, of course. So that's my take on that. But sometimes you will be forced into using your backman, your best alternative to negotiated agreement, but very, very, very rarely.
Thomas, with the effective negotiation stuff that we are talking about, there are some issues or the pointers that people don't understand at a very clear stand. Can you provide some of the tips for managing negotiation with individuals who have different styles or
Sure. Language is a funny thing. At one stage, there was work done to try and understand the extent to which the emotional intent of an individual was transferred in, firstly, words alone, in other words, in writing. So if you write it down, what's your chances of being understood? And it was the Moravian study that studied this. So it's looking at emotional intent. So words alone in writing. Then if you could add intonation to that, if you could add your voice to that and
Hmm.
put tonality in it. And then finally, if you could see people face to face. So this was known as the words, music in the voice, and the dance if you could see the body.
Okay.
7% for words alone, the likelihood of communicating emotional intent, correct emotional intent. Uh, then if you added voice to that, you could get up to another 38%. So words plus voice makes 45%, and fully 55% would be gained if you could see the person face to face. So there are three key strategies. So if you can see a person rather than writing to them. So this is why the email culture can be so dangerous. If you never talk to people you're dealing with, then the chances of
Hmm.
misunderstanding are 93%. That's a big risk to go in email alone. So that, for sure, that's one of the key things. And some of the things we're about to talk about will also um, look at this. Um, you also can become very good at seeing the world through the other person's eyes and showing that you can do this by using what we come to know as you communication. And you communication involves expressing ourselves as though we're looking through the other person's eyes. So instead of saying, I am pleased to tell you, it might be easier to say or better to say, you'll be pleased to learn. Rather than saying we can deliver within 1 week, it's better to say something like you can get delivery within 1 week. It's just a different point of view. You're looking from a different viewpoint and speaking from a different
Okay.
viewpoint. And you can also say things like your questions are answered immediately. Your jobs are done right because you get quick delivery because you benefit from our unique patented process because there's a whole way of speaking that is demonstrating the EU communication point of view. And roughly, as a guideline, this is something else you'd have, the I, me, mine, or us, our, we is times one. And you and your needs to be times five. So we need to say you, take the you point of view, 5 times more than we take an I or we or our. So let's stop there and take a few more questions around this, because we're beginning to join some stuff together now before we delve into another complex subject.
Thomas, both assertiveness and empathy are very, very important during the communication, and that makes the communication good and great. But the balancing of these two are very, very important. That is how to do those balancing. That is a important aspect of this communication strategy. So, can you elaborate that how we strike a balance between these two?
Sure, sure. I think it starts from an inner values point of view. Um, Something like this. It has to start from a belief there's a fundamental equalness of all human worth. We're neither more nor less than one another. We're different, that is all. And in that difference, at different point of view and different ways of looking at things, there is great strength. So all of us are made more if we can work from that point of view. So this is about creating choice rather than forcing people or manipulating people to agree with us. This is about getting a richer point of view, dealing from a richer and more choiceful set of options. The more options we have, the more likely we're able to improve on the one we've got. So, and there's of course time limits to some of this, but you do the best you can in the time available. And becoming the skillful party is a very important skill set that you can acquire as a manager or executive or director or any other of the leadership roles. So assertiveness is really about not allowing yourself to become the top dog or the bottom dog, not being bullied or become a bully, if you like, to put it in its most direct terms. And empathy is being able to see and feel and hear things as though you are listening through the other person's eyes and ears and able to understand what they might be feeling in your communication. So that's how we begin to strike a balance by becoming that skillful party.
Thomas, can you share some examples where you communication can lead to misunderstanding and conflicts? Because when you say you, people take it differently. So, where can we see such?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, Prem. So even with taking the you communication approach, if you're not coming from that good intention place, people will soon pick that up. But also, if we're not being very skillful, if we're communicating in an email alone or even in voice alone, we may not get the point across. So we need to use many ways, many devices to get our point across clearly and with understanding. And a device which is not in the list that we've talked about, but checking for understanding at regular intervals through something that you're trying to help a person understand is a very useful tool. So you simply say, can I just check your understanding of what I've just said? And then you can see how they're taking the things that you're saying and adjust it accordingly. That's one of the best strategies there is.
Yeah, Thomas, one more point that is very, very important, that what strategy people should employ to enhance our ability to express ourselves assertively and at the same time respectfully.
Okay. So uh, it's very prescient of you to ask this particular question at this particular moment, because we're at the point where we're about to enter the NLP meta model. NLP, for those of you that haven't uncovered it, is not a thing in itself. It's not a special magic tool. What it is, it's the collection of all the very best communication strategies, verbal strategies and mental strategies and emotional strategies that they could find in the world for achieving outcomes and retaining choice. So the meta model offers a framework for clarifying communication by identifying and challenging vague or limiting language. So that's again, it's back to this being the skillful party. And what I'd like to do is to just give you some headlines to go with the meta model. There's things all of us tend to do in the English language. Oh, let's mention one thing before, which is obviously the more words you have at your command, in other words, the greater your vocabulary, the more distinctions you'll be able to describe in your words, whether they're written or spoken. So that's good. So let's go back to the meta model. There's three big things that we do in terms of the meta model. There's generalizations. In other words, we say things that this is always true, or we can say we need to do this, or we need to do that, we must do the other, or we ought to do a thing. So there's generalizations when we try and make a specific instance true in all instances. There's things we do to cope, which are to do with deletions. In other words, we're streaming such a lot of information from the world, we can only cope by deleting chunks of it and then get it down to something we can actually talk about. Because if you tried to talk about everything that was happening in your moment, you couldn't do it. So there's things that we do. And the other thing that we tend to do is we tend to misunderstand and we have distortions. So we've got generalizations, deletions, and distortions. So as we take in the world, we do these three things to cope with the volume of information that's coming at us. So one of the estimations about how much data comes in through our senses to our unconscious mind is 10 to the power 11 bits per second is streaming in through all our senses to our unconscious mind. Now, obviously, the conscious mind can't cope with that. In fact, it is thought that the conscious mind can only cope with 7 plus or minus 2 in any moment, depending on how stressed or how resourced we're feeling. So there's a massive difference between the amount of information available in our environment and the amount we're processing consciously. So let me stop there. Let's take some more questions. This is a complex area and hard to do in a podcast, livecast situation. So let's have some questions for these two areas.
Speaking on mute, sorry about that. How can we look at NLP applied into our communication, that too specific to conflict resolution situations where we see a lot? Can these models be applied to improve those communications, Thomas?
Okay, I'm just going to talk through this briefly. And what I would suggest to people is they do find out more for themselves, or better still, come and join the Regenesis Network, where we cover all of this on regular briefings, special trainings. So that's what I would suggest you do with this. But there's three areas. First of all, generalizations. People will tend to use universal quantifiers. So things like, it's always like this, or it's not ever, nobody ever cares about me. They're universal quantifiers. So we're taking something that may be true in one instance and making it generalized to all. Then that's obviously not a helpful thing to do. So how you get around that is to ask the person, what would happen if? What would happen if you did get that? What would happen if it wasn't every time? When could it be different? So you ask questions to maybe break the habit of generalizing. And people also will tend to say, well, I need to do this, I must do that, or I ought to do the other, or I ought not to do this, or I ought not to. Well, what would happen if you did or didn't, or whatever else you could do? What happens if you do something different? And what we're looking for is to give them more choice, to say, well, maybe there isn't a general pattern. Maybe there are exceptions to the rule. And maybe what we need is more possibility. What prevents you? What would happen if you did do something different? And get them to explore other possibilities that might be out there. And it's amazing how that can begin to unblock and unlock a person in a negotiation or in a conflict, just by helping them privately explore um, gaps in their communication. In terms of deletions, unspecified verbs, the kind of things that people come up there would be things like, well, I can't do that because the rules say not. Well, how specifically do the rules say that you can't do that? Uh, and sometimes they'll delete things from their consciousness. Well, what about that? How does that help or not help? And with whom is that not possible? And so you're breaking it down instead of it all the time and always deleted. It's there sometimes. Sometimes people lack, they drop out, there'll be no person in the conversation or in the quotation. They'll say, well, they always want us to obey the rules, or they don't want us to do that ever. Well, who doesn't want you to do that? And what specifically don't they want you to do? So there's lots of things we can do to kind of restore the meaning to the deleted language. And comparative deletions, people say, well, it's better to always do this particular thing. Well, better than what? Or better than whom? And compared to what? Or compared to whom? So we can always restore, we can find out really what they're talking about. So this is a complex area and needs an increasing understanding of the way we use language. And if you come and work with us, we have a very full piece of training with this and some great documentation that can really help you practice being a more skillful communication. And also people say, well, maybe they're mind reading other people. That person doesn't like me. Well, how do you know? Or the loss was positive. So they don't like me. Well, who says? And according to whom? How do you know that? So these are all things that gradually you restore to a person's awareness and helps them have more choice. So here, this kind of incomplete communication tends to take away choice. So let me stop that again and take another question.
Thomas, as you have rightly said, that questioning assumptions and challenging generalization that always leads to a clear communication. So, can you, for the benefit of the audience, can I request you to provide some example of this for the more clarity?
Sometimes you'll be in a workplace situation or even in a negotiating situation or even in a customer dialogue situation where clearly the customer has got some internal blockage that is preventing them having choice about how to respond or how to go forward. And where these skills come to the fore is the skillful person is able to unstick the customer from their own internal gridlock, or unstick the negotiator or whoever it is, the employee, the manager. And they just are able to get other options in play. And that's so important. If you're in a negotiation with somebody who's stuck in themselves, you're not going to move it until you unlock that. So these become really good skills. And again, it's about being caring of and interested in the other party or parties that helps you be a more skillful person and being as willing to assist them as you are to assist yourselves. So again, let me stop there and take another question.
I think questioning is a very good pointer where we can get clarity to have the point discussed, getting discussed. But the problem, what we've seen, or the challenge that we see is how do we frame those kind of questions which can give a better answer to us, but we fail. What are some effective techniques for framing that prompt self-reflection, Thomas?
Oh, that's a very, very big question, Prem. Thank you for that. Um, I think I want to deal with two things here. And the first is Socratic questioning. Obviously, this belongs to Socrates, many believe, and sometimes know this as Rudyard Kipling's Six Best Friends. And really, the questions, the true open questions, are only predicated by six main words. So we've got what and how,
Okay.
which are the true questions that elicit reports of fact. Because what is a thing and how is a process. So they will always be good questions. If you want to open a conversation, you can say, tell me about what is happening in this situation. Tell me about what happened. Tell me about how this works. So it doesn't make for defensiveness. Then we've got what I call the supplementary questions, which are additional information that probably won't add much understanding, but you need to know this supplementary information. And this is when, where, and who. So we've got what and how are going to elicit reports of fact. You've got when, where, who is going to give you the supplementary information. And then if you want proof, you can say, okay, that's really helpful, thank you. Can you show me? Now, if the person is giving you kind of a glossed over picture of something, the show me will actually get rid of that. And they won't do that again if they're telling you things which are actually not true. So the show me element makes them, they can't tell you things that are not true, because the show me will actually reveal the truth of it. Show me how that works. And yes, take me there. Let's go to that part of the workplace or the premises, and let's go and have a look and help me understand and see what you're seeing. So that's the five that we've used, and we noticed we've only used five of the six best friends: what, how, when, where, who. And the sixth one, in most cultures of the world, it's used too early, and the sixth one actually is why. If you use it too early in a dialogue, it will knock the other people or the other person on the defensive, because they think you're trying to attach blame, rather than if you've got proper understanding with what and how and then by who, what you're looking for. So help me understand why you do it this way is a deeper rationale question. Help me understand why you've evolved this approach to this particular issue or problem. And then they feel less on the defensive and more explaining how they evolved their prior strategy or approach or way of doing things. And it makes them much more amenable to moving on. So that's one set of tools, and that's Socratic questioning. What, how, when, where, who, and why. With tell me about, to open the funnel, we call this funneling and tunneling. So tell me about opens the funnel. How and what and how gets you the facts, when the who, the supplementaries, and then show me at the bottom. Show me so I can properly see what you're saying. And then finally, why. Help me understand why you do it this way. So that's one lot you've got. And the other thing you've got in NLP, to go back to the NLP meta model, is chunking. We can chunk people up by asking, for what purpose do we do this? What does doing it that way get for you or get for us? Why is that important? When you do this, then what will happen? Of what is this an example? All of those things tend to push the other party up in their consciousness. If you want creativity, that's lateral thinking. So you go sideways. Can you give me another example? So sometimes if you can think about something with another example, you can come up with new ideas. So what else could this mean? And because, and could you do anything different? All examples of lateral questions. And then finally, sometimes we want to take people down into the detail. So can you give me an example of this? So if you want to test it out to see whether it's true, you can drop down into a number of examples. Or you could say, what specifically, or how specifically, who specifically, when specifically, or where specifically, and about what. So all of that helps you explore, hopefully, non-defensively. If you use those principles, you've got quite a lot there to play with. So again, let me stop there and let's take some more questions.
Yeah, Thomas, Thomas, we are discussing very, very important topics, and that is questioning. Am I audible?
Yes, yes, you are indeed, Sunil.
Okay. So we are discussing very important topic, that is questioning, and Prem has raised a very valid point, that how to, put the questions and how to frame the question. That is very, very important. So, Thomas, I will request you how this Socratic questioning can be facilitate dialogue and problem solving, particularly in conflict situation.
Well, the key here, Sunil, is to use your skillfulness as the skillful party to enable the functioning of the other person to be raised. So, by asking them skillful questions, it allows them to enhance their resources by finding new answers to things that they may be not aware of yet, or they've deleted from their consciousness, or they've generalized off the page. So you're putting them back in touch with the resources that are actually present in their world, in their mind, in their situation. So that's what the skillful party is doing all the time, is trying to look not only at their own wants, our outcomes as the skillful party's outcomes, but appreciating the outcomes that are needed to be achieved in the situation. Um, so we then facilitate the dialogue and perhaps the people and the process of communication between people by adding something, a set of tools we know will help us move towards whatever the outcomes are in that situation. So that is the key to facilitating dialogue. And the word facilitate means to make easy. So you're using your skills to introduce a process or a question that will make it easier for the other people to become better performers. I think I need to stop there and maybe take another question.
Thomas, how can mind mapping be used to streamline communications and making decisions?
Okay. Well, this is one of the last resources that we're going to look at today. And mind mapping is a way of encouraging a person to be able to lay out on a single page what we know of any visual uh, diagram or representation. It's better if we can get it in a single take of the eye. And the mind map just does that. The author of the best books on the subjects of mind mapping, you may have heard of him. His name is Tony Buzan. He's the late Tony Buzan now, but he wrote some really excellent books. I had the good fortune to work with him one to one and one to group on numerous occasions. A fantastic teacher about how best to use the mind and how to use written representations as a single take of the eye kind of diagrams. So get yourself a book, or better still, come and work with us. And maybe what I'd say today is, rather than trying to cram all this in, if you've got a lot from this session and would like to know more about mind mapping, we're very happy to send you a mind map about mind maps, how to do mind maps. So we can give that to you. And the other thing that we can do is also give you a set of principles for creating really effective meetings, short, effective, and enjoyable meetings. So we have some principles for that too. So if you've enjoyed the session today, maybe they're the things to go for. And I won't try and get mind mapping taught to you in a verbal presentation only, because it's a very visual technique. But I have got a visual that will help you understand. So if you want one of those, email Prem or Sunil or myself, and we will get those pieces across to you. So any other questions we have before we close off today?
Thomas, we have discussed most of the point, and you have elaborated each and every point of communication. And I'm happy to put a point here, that communication is the most neglected skill set by management also. Everybody talks regarding that, technology skill set, and technology is moving very fast, this, that. But as far as communication skill is concerned, that is not giving due attention. And I personally feel at Regenesis, we always believe that communication is very, very important. And I personally believe that if you are a very good technical person, you know that you have the commercial skill, you are technically very sound. But if you don't know how to communicate, how to take the team along, then it is very difficult to get the final objective what we all are chasing for. So we have discussed very, very important topics. And thank you, Thomas. You have elaborated it very nicely. And I'm happy to note that we have taken two sessions on this communication skill. And this shows that how important this skill set is. At Regenesis, we believe particularly communication skill is very, very important. And this is not important in professional life only. This is important in personal life also. So I will urge all the viewers, all the listeners, that if you are not putting attention on this, please take appointment of yourself, find it out, what are the lapses, what are the gaps you have in these skills. And the basically the pointer is that if you will take appointment of yourself, you will find that where something went wrong and what was the reason of that wrong. Then you will find in 50% times that communication was the key. So that is very, very important. And I will take this opportunity to urge all the viewers that if you want to get more benefit out of it, you want to learn the mind mapping model or other models, all the case studies, then please do write to us, please communicate to us, and take this advantage of global expertise. So over to you, Thomas, to add something more.
Sure, sure. What many people may not know is Regenesis is built around 12, that's all 12, only 12 one page master maps. Everything we talked about communication is in fact summarized on one page. And when you're part of the Regenesis network, one of the briefings you will get in one of the months will be the whole of this page. Every single one of the 12 pages is life enhancing and life transforming for you as a manager or an executive and director. And it's also transformational for your organization. Every one of them will enable you to increase productivity, to increase profit, to increase revenues, not only for your organization, but ultimately, this is how you systematically build your career and salary. And I can't say more than that, really. We are inviting you to come and join us in the Rexel network, which is in fact the Genesis Excellence Network, and become one of the top managers, executives, and directors that are operating in India. We'd love to have you join, and it's a really inexpensive step to take. And you will see the value that you will get is absolutely vast. And as Sunil just said, communication is the hub. So I'm going to go now and thank you all for listening. Get in touch with any of us to join. We'll happily get you on board. When you're on board, even, you get more than £1,000 or $1,000 of value just on the personal strategy and everything that comes on board. So come on down, come and celebrate, come and be part of the movement. We'd be happy to see you. Prem, over to you.
Uh, Session we guides on how aspects of communication, brainstorming, some of the key elements that we discussed on effective communication between teams and how questioning can happen, what are the meta models of NLP, and we discussed on the types of negotiation skills that can be this one used, and also we talked about how to gain commit. Few things that we discussed in our we are live on LinkedIn live, and we are having our podcast stream to YouTube and Twitter and Facebook. So thank you for joining us today on LinkedIn. We have hope that you found the discussion valuable and looking forward to see you again soon for more insights on driving your own and organization success. Until the next, thank you for being part of the show today. Uh, Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Sunil.
Thanks, Prem. Thanks,
Thank you,
Sunil.
Prem. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.